Thank you. Happy to be here. I'm actually from Utah, so when we needed a speaker to come, I was more than happy to volunteer. This is where I grew up, and you are my people, so I'm happy to be here. So I joined Microsoft not too long ago, actually, just in December, and a couple of funny things just to tell. So the product's name is Visual Studio Code, and to avoid confusion, this is not Visual Studio. It's totally different product. I actually was speaking at a conference, a Microsoft conference, and there's like 300 people, because they get a lot of people to come, and within the first 30 seconds, 50 people got up and left. And I was like, man, did I say something wrong? I offended all these people right in my first conference talk, and we find out it's because they thought we were talking about Visual Studio's code, like some tips and tricks for Visual Studio. So Visual Studio Code, I prefer VS Code, or we like our Twitter handle @code. Kind of makes it a little more easier to tell the difference between the products. What I want to talk about today is just a story of tools. It's my story in finding the right tool to use. And funny enough, the speaker before is my friend Paul, who works at lucidchart, and that's where I learned to write JavaScript, was at lucidchart in the summer of 2013. And so when I started this internship, I had never written any JavaScript, and we had a huge JavaScript code base, hundreds of thousands of lines. And it was kind of intimidating to get into as a beginner with just a couple years of programming experience. And one of the biggest reasons it was intimidating is because of the tools we were using to edit our code. So I came from, at BYU, where I did my undergrad, we would use Visual Studio and Eclipse to write C++, C#, Java. And these tools had lots of integration, right? Like as a freshman programmer, it's like, okay, I type this and then I press F5 and everything just magically works. Well, when I moved to this more JavaScript environment, we had all these make files, and we had all these different things we had to run from the terminal. In hindsight, it actually was great for me in my learning to be a good programmer, because I learned how a lot of these tools worked. But there was quite the learning curve. I had to learn even the code navigation. I remember a lot of my fellow developers were just masters at global find, and they'd know some regex to find where this method was or where this object's defined. So I was missing some of that as I was moving around. And even like people were using Vim and Emacs, and I remember the first time I got stuck in Vim. I didn't know how to get out of it. What was it? Escape. I just couldn't, maybe you remember your first time in Vim too, but I just shut down the terminal and had to start over whatever I was working on. Eventually I found Sublime Text, which was awesome. How many of you use Sublime today? Yeah, it's a really popular tool, and it was really great for me. It finally, it got me into just at least a shallow learning curve tool. That was the idea. It didn't have my integrations right that I had in the bigger IDE, but it was simple. I didn't have to remember key bindings to start and stop the editor, and it had some really nice things, like the plugins. One of my friends said, oh, here, if you copy and paste this Python script, you can now get all these packages, which was cool. So I could install plugins into Sublime and really kind of cater it to my type of experience. But there was some things I was missing. Especially in school, I got used to this where I could just set a breakpoint. I hit the breakpoint, I could step through this, and I always wondered why I couldn't have that in Sublime Text. And maybe there were some packages, ways around it, but how I did it at lucidchart at least was, and later when I was working at my startup, if I needed to debug something, I would fire up IntelliJ, go to the bathroom, get a drink, because it would take a while for it to load. I'd come back and then click through all these GUIs, because I never could remember exactly where it was. Finally find it, look up how to configure debugging, and there we go. Needless to say, if I had to pull out the debugger, it was a pretty big bug. Most of the time I just stuck to my console.logging, and that was good enough for me. So this kind of led me, where I'm going with this is I'm making a checklist of the features that mattered to me for my editor, and then I'm going to show you where Visual Studio Code or VS Code fits into that. So the things that were important, which I loved with Sublime, was it was fast, it was simple, it was very customizable. We could have different themes. One of my dev friends just had a beautiful looking development environment all the time, and I like that. I like that experience in Sublime. Extendable, which I talked about, and easy, good support for multiple languages. Like when I was using Eclipse, it was great for Java, but if I needed to write a Python script or a Bash script, I'd have to go to a totally different tool. I liked that in Sublime I could at least get syntax highlighting or in colorization. That was great, support for multiple languages. But there was two features that I really missed in my Sublime experience and in the code editor, is this idea of Intellisense, which is kind of a Microsoft-y word, but it essentially is meaning this context-aware auto-completion. And you can get some packages in Sublime that'll do that for you, but this is like, if you've used Visual Studio, if you've used Eclipse, you know this is your API documentation right at your fingertips. In further code navigation, you could command-click into methods. It made it easier to reason about the structure of the code. And then the last one here on my checklist is the debugging, which I talked about before. So what is Visual Studio Code? Like I've tried to show here, or what I'm going to show here is Visual Studio Code is not Visual Studio, so it's meant to be a lighter weight editor. And there's three key differences with Visual Studio. First, VS Code is cross-platform. Some of you may wonder, why did Microsoft build this editor? Well, you are the reason Microsoft built this editor, and what we're trying to do is we recognize there's a whole bunch of developers on Mac and Linux, and even some developers on Windows that we don't reach. Microsoft doesn't reach well. It doesn't give them good tooling, and we just don't know them very well and what their future needs could be. So the big mission for VS Code is to build something and go where those developers are. And I like that. Like when I joined Microsoft, I said, as long as I can use a Mac, I'm happy to go. So it's cross-platform. It's very fast. It's been the key feature from the beginning. I blocked out the comparison here just because I don't want to bash on our on alternatives to VS Code. But this is the community sentiment: is VS Code is fast, and we have a lot of engineering resources that go into keeping it high performance. And then finally, it's free and open source. And you might be wondering, wait, isn't this the Microsoft that Bill Gates started? It is the Microsoft that Bill Gates started. And we actually have a lot of good open source initiatives at Microsoft, but VS Code is one of the flagship open source products at Microsoft. And we have a lot of transparency in our planning. We put all our iterations on there. And it's a fun product to work on because of that. So where we try to land here is we've got the IDEs on the far side, and then the editors, and we try to land somewhere in the middle, favoring the editor side. So you can see we're clearly influenced by Atom and Sublime and our design and how things look. But we tried to cherry pick the features that we felt like were missing from the editor experience, Intellisense and debugging. So let me show you, I'm going to go through this checklist and show you how VS Code fits each of these characteristics or styles that I was looking for in an editor, especially as I was starting my journey with JavaScript. We're going to first go here to code, and we're going to download the product. So if you've ever downloaded Visual Studio, you'll notice the difference here. It's about 47 megs, so pretty small. We can download it in just a few seconds. And unpack the zip and start the app. Yes, open. So pretty small and fast to get going. We're trying to be Sublime-like in that way. And then very simple. There's only a few buttons here on the left-hand side. We have a status bar here on the bottom that gives you information about the files. And then you have your familiar command palette where you can find if you want to find the settings, anything you want to find command-wise is in the command palette. And then our quick open, which I don't have. Let me open a folder here. Oops. I'm not getting this right. File, open, UtahJS Conference. So if we want to quickly go to our different files, we can do that too. And we can do some neat things like entering this @ symbol. We can do some symbol navigation. Makes it pretty simple. So is VS Code fast? Is it simple? I'm giving it a check and a check. So customizable, we can do change our theme here. Kind of a nice thing. You can easily preview it, what it's going to look like. If you really want to go Sublime-like, you can go with Monakai here. Stick with the default. And then a recent addition we added is this file icon theming. So notice the files on the far, what's that, your guys' left, changing next to the files, so you can do that. If you want to find more of those in the marketplace, you can. Can install those. I've installed a lot of them that are available. Changing keyboard shortcuts is easy. A number of you that I've talked to... Oh, too small. Thank you for telling me that. It looks big to me. So changing key bindings is easy, and this is a style we've taken with a lot of our stuff, is we want to bring you right down to the code. So you'll notice changing keyboard shortcuts is editing a JSON-like file. And the purpose of this is we want to make it easy to check things into version control or to share it across teams, kind of bring you closer to the code that you're used to. Here with settings, if we go in here, you'll notice we actually get this Intellisense experience. So I just do a simple control space, and this gives me, if I want to turn off the line numbers, so I can type in line numbers, I can see how to do that right there. That makes it easier, and we feel more comfortable to developers and their style and what we like as developers. So that's settings and key bindings. Check that off for customizable with the themes and the file icons. Now the extensions, we have a number of extensions. Now this first view here shows me the different ones I have installed. Now this was a pain I had with Sublime at times, was just knowing which extensions I had installed and what they were actually doing for me. So we tried to solve that in a few different ways. So this allows me, I can look at this Git history one, for example, which that's strange. Let me reload that, see if that fixes. And you can see all the information on how the extension is supposed to work right here in the details view, see the different contribution points. And there's some pretty cool extensions that people have built. For example, this Chrome debugger, which this is also small. Sorry about that. There's some issue going on with my zoom in. You can hook up Chrome to be the debugger in VS Code, and you can do that via an extension. Essentially what it's doing is allowing you to set the breakpoint in VS Code and not have to context switch to Chrome, which is pretty nice, and a whole bunch of others. So here's our show popular extensions. You can see this is where we give our multiple language support. So you're going to get syntax colorization for other languages out of the box. And then for JavaScript and TypeScript, those are our first-class languages that we ship with. And the idea there is that we're providing Intellisense, code formatting, refactorings, all those language service-like features out of the box. And if you want it for other languages, you can install an extension that does that. It keeps the tool lightweight, but then allows you to customize it. So you can see C#, Python. We have a really good Go extension. And then there's a lot, if you want to look for linters, you can install ESLint, JSHint, a bunch of different things to make this extensible and personalized to what you're looking for in your editor. So extendable and support for multiple languages. So let me show you now. I wrote this code, whoops, and I just closed it. There we go. I think I lost my... I wrote this little app. How many of you guys watched the big game on Saturday? This is the Utah-BYU game. Okay. I watched the game, even though it was tough to watch. But I wanted to build a follow-up here just to see if BYU could ever beat Utah. Let me load this. While this loads, I'll show you a little bit about the code. So I have this front-end app, and I have two processes running here. One is the Webpack dev server is going to be serving up my front end, And then I have this back-end service that's just giving me a demonstration purpose to show the front end and the back-end differences. So going back here, so I built this arm wrestling match. So what we're going to do, let's see if BYU can beat Utah at arm wrestling. Utah wins again. Okay. Well, maybe they'll win. Just one more time. Utah wins again. Okay, maybe we'll just BYU's destined never to beat Utah. Okay, so what I want to do in the app is I want to build just something to keep track of the records, so we can see over time who has the most arm wrestling wins. So I have some of that plumbed up here, but I want to add a little bit more as I show off Intellisense, and we'll zoom into the code. So we'll look here first at this handle click. Is that big enough for you guys out there in the peanut gallery? Okay. And we get some good things here. So if I do this dot, this is your like Visual Studio Eclipse-like experience. You can see we're giving you what we can intelligently figure out are the methods on this object, which is great. And then if it's provided, we'll also pull in the documentation, any sort of parameters, and their types. You can see here that we're not providing the type winner any there. So if we do this, and then we say data winner, we can see the parameter hints. So this is nice, especially when getting into a new code base or parts of the code you're not familiar with. It's really helpful. So we get that for our own code that we write through a few different ways. We get that with, if you are using TypeScript, obviously, we can read the TypeScript type information. We also get that just running a type inference algorithm on the code and doing the best that we can to figure it out. And then third, we'll get that through the JS docs. If you provide JS docs, then we can give you the type hints. We also give that for third-party modules that you'll install. So here's Lodash, and this is pretty great because this is a pretty large library. But if I just type each, for each, I can look here, see the documentation, make sure it's the right method for me, hit tab, and now I can see inside here what I'm looking, what type of parameters I want to pass in. So this dot state schools. I'm just refactoring this for loop above to use for each because that seems like a good style to go for. And we'll do this. And then there's a good, same type of keyboard shortcuts or hints you're going to see in your other editors. So that was the Alt down arrow to be able to do that. So we get first party, third party. And then this gets pretty cool, especially if you're using React, JSX. We also give Intellisense for this in a few different ways. So I talked about the code navigation. If I click here and I say go to definition, and this is going to bring me, oh look, that's a problem. Thank you, linter. I can go in here and do peak definition. So I get this cool little peak window. This is nice to not have to switch files all the time, but I can just quickly see if this is the type of file I'm looking at. And if I want to, I can make a quick edit. So this is where I'm going to do class name equals row. I'm just adding the view on top of this. And notice how I also get Intellisense for the attributes of the JSX, which is pretty cool. So like when I'm as I switch around different products, I always forget about this, that JSX doesn't use class, but class name. So that's a nice little hint I get. And we're going to do call mid 12. Close that tag. And then we want to show, do style. Just giving a little styling to our wins record. Okay, there we go. We did all that in the peak window, and if we want to jump into the actual context, we can do that as well. So it makes it easier to navigate around the code base, and especially, as I said, with new code or code you're not as familiar with, we find that helpful. Okay, can we beat Utah this time? Oh, again. Man, every time. Okay. So Intellisense, and I'm setting you guys up a little bit because now I'm going to show you that there's a bug in the code causing Utah to win every time. So what we're going to do now is show debugging, and I've got 5 minutes left, perfect timing. So we're going to go to server.js. Looks like I left this from practice. We can set a breakpoint here at our endpoint. And then setting up debugging is simple. You can go here, click this wrench, and it will create this JSON file. So again, this is like, it's nice. You can check it into version control, share it across the team so everyone has a familiar thing here. And then there's a few different ways to debug. So you can either have the debugger actually launch the process for you, or we're going to use attach to process. And I'm going to use this attach to process because I think it's pretty cool. Remember, my processes are already running, and I'm now it's going to ask me which of these processes in the workspace do you want to connect to. I'll connect to server.js. And now I'm going to hit arm wrestle. Not exactly sure why it stopped there, but maybe I left a stray breakpoint. So now we're here. We're in the debugging view. You can see if I click here, I'm back to the file browser, debugging view. It gives me the locals over here, and then I can click through the call stack that's on your guys' far left, and see where the code has been. And then I can also, as I'd expect, and this is what I am trying to drive home, was I was missing this when I was learning how to write JavaScript, and as I was looking for tools to help me, is I can easily hover over here and see the nature of my data as it's getting passed in, and then I can step through my code or step into it just like we'd expect. And here's the bug. Go Utes, X school equals BYU, return Utah. That's a problem. Let's just for demo's sake, let me show you another cool thing here. I can actually get in here and see the get blame. Looks like this was done by Utah Rocks. So trying to mess things up for me. So we'll go in here and delete this, and then we can just detach the debugger. I actually need to just restart that real quick there. We'll load another one. Well, while that's loading, let me show you a couple other cool things. I've been using this task command, which, so if you've used WebStorm, PHPStorm, they have this task runner. So we brought that in a lightweight way. Essentially, it's this small file, tasks.json, and it allows you to hook up to your to VS Code different commands for running whatever you want to run. So this can be gulp, npm. Here I'm having it execute a bash script. And essentially gives this like F5 type experience. Like I just press F5, I can attach a key binding to this and get it. So let's see now who's going to win. Utah wins. It's got to happen one time. BYU wins. There we go. Okay. So to close it off, we can then commit this code. Right here you can see I get a nice diff view. I can write a commit, made life fair again, and the commit, if I needed to undo it, I can do that. I can rebase and pull and do a whole bunch of other things. So that wraps up debugging. I showed you a couple others. Integrated terminal we didn't go over, but that's another cool feature. Thank you for your time. I'd love to connect with you. I'll be around tonight, and we're on Twitter at @code and @WadeRyan_mine. Thank you.
Thank you, Wade.